On to this now, where continued load shedding with no solution in sight has probably been the most topical subject in any setting in South Africa this year. Some have argued that 2022 has seen the worst year in Eskom's performance, and the reasons range from lack of finances to plant breakdowns and or sabotage. However, according to Eskom's annual results released last week, the power utility has seen an improvement in financial performance. Debt has reduced from 401 billion to 396.8 billion, while accumulated debt by municipalities was at 44.8 billion by March 2022. The organization says continued poor plant performance and high debt levels continue to be a concern. That was speaking to us now. For more on this, let's speak to Hlathi Madela, Executive Director of the South African Energy Forum. So a very good morning to you. A warm welcome to Morning Live. I mean, it's been a frantic year for Eskom and South Africans, from, plant breakdowns due to non-maintenance, moving from, stage 2 to stage 6 load shedding, with threats of even a stage 8, and the quality of coal, no money for diesel, debts. There is a lot. Talk to us about, if you could summarize, Eskom's year 2022.
Good morning to you, ma'am, and good morning to the SABC listeners. It's been indeed a frantic year, and it continues so. Even in the last days of the 2022, we're still in load shedding when there's not a lot of power demand, because the industries, most of them are closed down up until maybe second week of January. So in a nutshell, the Eskom situation, Eskom is really on its way to going past. Something needs to be done, because there's a lot of reports coming from different sectors that are confirmed by the same information that comes from Eskom, that we've been subjected to an equivalent of 200 days of load shedding in a calendar year of 365 days. The so-called plant breakdowns, the CEO is only finding his voice now. So it's been a very, very terrible year. But this year has been accompanied by the people not wanting to tell the truth. So I believe it's been dubbed as the worst year in the Eskom history. But the situation reflects itself, because it's a continued plan to try and harbor or hide what is actually going on. It's a terrible year for the history of Eskom in South Africa because of Eskom.
Mm-hmm. When you add together the hours that the public was subjected to load shedding, what is the equivalent of that in terms of the number of days in 2022?
It's an equivalent of 200 days. That's basically like every hour added from all of us. It basically means that Eskom has not been able to supply power for 200 days out of 365 days. And that's scary. That's about 56% of the time that Eskom was unable to supply power to this country.
Now let's talk about the tenure of Andre Tereta, who's, ending his term at the end of March. How would you sum up how he was at the helm of Eskom?
I would sum it up as the person who has robbed the people of South Africa, if not the person who was not close to commit treason, simply because he got paid a lot of money, something towards about 7 million a year, for him to look after the interests of Eskom. His primary job is to look after the interests of Eskom. In a long list of his key performance indicators, it's got top one that says, please maintain the Eskom operational situation, and it's described as an energy availability factor of 75%. It basically means all the machines and everything that you've been given come back and tell us that at least 75% of the time they are available to provide power. And the director failed to achieve that. So he's been someone who's been protected, and it's quite difficult to understand why would a person fail a basic thing to maintain the availability of these machines. And ever since beginning of the year, it's been averaging about 59%, and even got it as low as 51%. So I don't want to delve into other factors, but Andre Tereta has failed, and he has not given reasons why he has been failing.
if you were the CEO of Eskom, what would you do differently?
If I was the CEO of Eskom, I would first confront the government. When I say confront, have a hard talk with the government to ask the government to back off. Why do we say that? Back off in terms of saying, give me all the executive powers as an Eskom CEO. I've got men and women who are manning up these power stations. I'm going to have a conversation with them to first get Eskom to work. There may have been all these other contractual obligations that we have as a country, which talk to you as a government from the National Treasury point of view, Department of Public Enterprise point of view, as well as the Department of Mineral Resources and Energy. I understand the contracts. Can we go and negotiate with the people that we need to defer this contract for something like 2 years or 1.5 years? Then I will go to my power station managers and I will recruit the best people. Some of them are already there. And ask the government to please stop sticking its nose in the business of Eskom. Right now, the government holds all the executive powers. And the director has not been able to say to Minister Pravin Gordhan, could you please walk away? You've given us the key performance indicators. There is head of planning, there's procurement office, there's power station managers, there's chief operating officer, there's technology planners. Leave us now. We will report to you whether we've achieved what you set out for us. So he has not been able to do that, and there's no CEO that will succeed at Eskom if they don't ask the government to step away from the daily running of Eskom. That's what I will do.
Now, Minister of Energy, Gwede Mantashe, saying, is agitating to overthrow the state. Was that a fair comment for members of the executive to cry foul, given that, they're all in the same government that has failed to come up with solutions?
It's a fair comment because you hire Andre de Ruyter and his executive team and the board to be in a competitive market, and a very weak competitive market, because Eskom still hold about 92% of the market share. So they are dominant in the market. You then have these men and women of Eskom who continue telling you about the business of the opposition, so the business of the competitors. Andy Director has spent all 3 years trying to say to the government, give up on Eskom even though you are paying me. The answer does not lie with fixing Eskom. The answer lies with giving the business of Eskom to the independent power producers. So it's 100% right, Mr. Mantashe, to say this has been used as a regime change. He keeps telling us about the business of the competition.
And if you had to be given a chance to search for a new CEO for Eskom, in which direction would you be looking at to replace Andre de Ruyter?
It has to be a direction for somebody who has a mix of having work in the plants themselves, but also work at the corporate office of Eskom. Even if we have a strong candidate coming from outside, we have to throw in somebody who's quite familiar with the business, the operation and maintenance business of Eskom. Not someone who's been told about it, but someone who has been there before. We also have someone who's got an appreciation of how the executive leadership of Eskom operates, because the answer to actually get us out of the load shedding and stop all of this madness relies on having a strong executive team that has got consistent talk with the board of Eskom to empower men and women who are on the ground on operations and maintenance. So you're going to need that someone, and that someone cannot come from outside. Under the head, it come from outside. We now need someone, when somebody picks up the phone and say, I need an instrumentation that costs about 3 million rand. That instrumentation must be bought now and be given to that guy, not to tell him stories and say, no, we haven't got money and all of that. If someone says, I'm short of diesel, give them the diesel. So that's the type of CEO that we need, someone who's been there, someone who's got an appreciation of how the culture of executives of Eskom operate, and that someone will know that they operate in fear, they operate in a very unhealthy environment. But it's somebody who has to transcend above all of that and be able to confront the government and say, government, I'm going to go out and tell the public that the people who are subjecting the load shedding is you, because you will not let us execute our decisions as executive directors of Eskom. That's the kind of candidate that we need.
Now, Eskom's annual results show, an improvement in financial performance. Looking at the figures, the organization's, financials reflect, a reduction in gross debt of 401.8 billion to 396.8 billion. I mean, how significant is the improvement?
It means nothing. It's a 5 billion rand improvement simply because they've been jacking up the price of electricity. So it means absolutely nothing. If there was no increase given to Eskom, it wouldn't mean anything. They're not talking about the bailouts that have been getting to the government. Remember, the government committed to 69 billion rand bailouts, which was going to be split over 3 years. So it's not an improvement on the financial performance. It's under the rata saying, I will not talk about any other variables of Eskom. I'm only going to talk about this variable that looks as if there's an improvement. I'm telling you, there was a debt of 401 billion rand. Currently, it is sitting at 396, because that's the business of Andy the Rater. I will serve the creditors. I will serve the bondholders. I will do anything. I will bend over backward, serving the interests of those who loaned money to Eskom, but I will not look after the interest of Eskom to keep the light on. That's exactly what Andy Rater is all about. So there is no improvement. He has failed on the energy availability factor. In fact, in his key performance indicators, this whole thing of reducing debt is further down the pecking order. The issue here, keep the lights on, keep the country going by achieving an energy availability factor of 75%. He has failed on that. He's reporting on something that doesn't matter to us. If you're sitting in your home now, you've got to take your children to school. You're not going to go and pay people before you go and pay your school fees. And the director is avoiding to pay the school fees, and the children are being kicked out of school, and he's telling us that he has paid game, he has paid the furniture shops that he was owing furniture to. Meanwhile, the children are sitting at home because the school fees is not been paid. They won't let them to school.
Now, Eskom says, it continued poor plant performance and, high debt levels continue to be a concern. What is Eskom's challenge, and are Eskom's problems financial or performance or lack thereof?
Eskom's problem, I like the question. Eskom problem, at the heart of Eskom's problem is an unavailability of sufficient finance. Every time they collect money from revenues, they are confronted by having to reprioritize which direction they prioritize first in terms of the money that comes in. What we don't hear, how much of this money gets given to the operations and maintenance and the power station managers? How much of this money gets allocated to make sure whatever those reasons for the breakdowns, and they've been pronounced, and they've been attended to, and there is a period in which to attend to those reasons. Eskom is not coming forward and tell us exactly what problems do they have in prioritizing the little that they have. So at the heart of Eskom problem is the financial resources, but also there is this thing of being creative, of wanting to prioritize other people and put Eskom as last. And that's why Andy the Rater was boldly saying Eskom is a dead horse. It's like you saying to SABC, SABC is a dead horse. I don't think they will keep you in that job. But Andy the Rater was able to say, you are paying me to manage a dead horse. This horse is dead. I'm going to go and hang around with the independent power producers because you've asked me to manage something that I perceive to be dead. So that is the situation. At the heart of it is finances, but it's also reprioritization of finances and not being able to take tough decisions to ask the creditors to give us a breather of 2 years and come hard on all the people that we owe money to say, we will pay you, but please give us a breather to sort out all these legacy problems now.
Another thing is, Germany and UK are going back to coal. What does that mean for our country, which has secured a grant, from the Western countries during COP26 for just transition?
What that means, Germany going back to coal and the UK going to coal, back to coal, it means the global conversation of we are moving away from coal to an extent that the investment banks, including Standard Bank and all the banks in this country, they have said they will no longer invest in coal. It means once Russia and Ukraine went into the war, there was a major destabilization of the gas availability to the European countries. It means Germany and the UK, they look at what they needed now to keep the lights on. So they went against what they have been preaching around the world, because the priority is to make sure that they don't subject their country to load shedding. So therefore, they went back and said, the only source of energy that we can get now to make sure that the lights don't go off is coal. Forget about what we've been preaching. Forget about the perception. Take this resource, put the money into it, revive the old power stations that have been closed down, kick out the wind farm, clear it up so that you can sink a shaft there. England said, even though there's a buzz that we've been the cleanest country, it doesn't matter that the last mine that we sank was 30 years ago. There's no gas now. We're looking around for a quick solution. The quick solution seems to be coal. We are now digging a brand new mine. They have prioritized their nations. This is what we needed to do. But Andy the Director has spent the longest time telling us that we have to move away from coal. I like what Germany and UK has done, because they have showed that in times of crisis, they will prioritize their nations over the big global talk of a move away from fossil fuel. Let me put it this way. We're never going to move away from the fossil fuel up until 2060.
All right.
That's the fact of the matter.
All right. Hlathi Madela, thank you so much for talking to us. He was helping us reflect on Eskom's performance in 2022. And he said we had 200 days of load shedding in 2022.